All right, one moment. Can you guys hear me like this? Okay, cool. So today our lecture is going to be on Flexbox and layouts. But first, let's do some announcements. Homework 5 is going to be released today, but it's going to be due next Thursday. Lab 4 is due next Tuesday, and homework 4 is due today. Your midterm mockup check-in is, the deadline for that is tomorrow on Friday, end of the day. And you can attend any TA's OH, so it doesn't have to be your own assigned TA. Yeah, and then the full midterm project, which includes all the coding that you'll have to do, that will be due on Tuesday, October 17th at 11:59. Any questions on the due dates? Okay, cool. So we'll continue on to the lecture. Today we're covering Flexbox. So positioning things manually is a huge pain. You guys might have seen in your work so far, but adding all the margin and all the padding is really, really annoying. So a lot of people have encountered this, and we've come up with other solutions. So let's first review what the box model is. So there's 4 parts to the box model. There's your content, which is whatever text you're containing or some image or whatever it is. Yeah, basically the picture itself. Right outside of that is your padding. So that's the space between the picture and the picture frame. Yeah, just right outside of the content. Right outside of that is your border, which you can think of as the picture frame. The margin is the spacing between pictures, which just gives you the ultimate space outside of everything. Any questions on how that's organized? Great. So now let's get into something new called Flexbox. So far we've encountered a few ways that CSS helps us arrange things on a page. For example, the box model are different types of positioning: absolute, relative, static, or fixed, and our display properties. So today we're going to discuss using Flexbox to create our layouts in CSS. So just like you guys have been doing, but doing it a little bit easier, but it's a little bit more rigid. So let's say my HTML looks like this, and we need to be able to tell the CSS, should the blue boxes be arranged horizontally or vertically? How much spacing should be around each box? And should the blue boxes be at the top or the bottom of the red box? So a lot of these things we can define using our Flexbox. So for example, if we wanted our layout to be vertical, and we want them stacked, but we want them in the middle, we can do that with Flexbox. We can put them at the bottom. We can put them next to each other. We can do all sorts of things. So what we do is we use Flexbox to align the parent element's children. So as you can see in this example, we have this big container, the dark outline around everything, and we have 2 elements inside of that, which we call flex items. So the relationship here is between flex container and flex item, but that specific naming you guys don't really have to remember very much. The main thing here is that we have 2 axes. One is called our main axis, and the other is called our cross axis. I believe we're going to go into this a little bit more, but the main axis is the direction you want things to be in. So for example, if you want to stack your items horizontally, your main axis would be the horizontal axis, and your cross axis would be vertical. This is against what is normally happening, which is your vertical axis is your main axis, and your horizontal axis is your cross. Does anyone have questions on that? That's a little bit confusing as well. Okay, great. So we'll kind of walk through what we're seeing here. You're seeing a lot of main and cross names throughout this entire diagram, but all that's saying is that it's the main axis has a main size, which is in this case the width, and the cross axis has a cross size, which in this case is your height. We also define main start to be on the left side and main end to be on the right side because we can flip those. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So let's go through the actual code of how this would work. So we have our parent container, which we called here best box. And inside of it, we have two children. And so in our CSS, we're going to define the display to be flex. So display flex is saying that this parent container is going to be a flex box, and everything inside of it should be spaced as if it were inside of a flex box. So what we say here is specify display flex to be on the parent container. It tells us that we can use Flexbox properties to define how the children will be aligned and spaced out. So let's say we want our box to have its items aligned in a row. To do that, we can have flex direction row, which is our default direction. So if you don't put anything, it'll be flex direction row. This says that everything inside of it will be in a single row going horizontally. And that's what that looks like. So we have our two children stacked horizontally, which is something that you guys might not be like familiar or safe with right now, but we'll get through this. Yeah, so our parent container contains these two, and it's putting them side by side. Now, it's important to recognize that we have child 1 on the left side in this one and child 2 on the right side, because we can also flip that, as I mentioned earlier, using flex direction row reverse. So row reverse just says everything inside of here, the axis is going from right to left instead of left to right. Does everyone kind of understand that? Cool. So for a like kind of bigger example, if we had 3 children, child 1, 2, and 3, row reverse would say that it would go 3, 2, 1 when we're reading left to right. Cool. So now what if we wanted to stack them vertically still? So we could do this with flex direction column, which also has a column reverse. And flex direction column says stack everything vertically inside of my parent container. Any questions on how we did column here? So we can also do nested flex boxes, and this can get complicated. So yeah, just be careful when you're writing these out. Yeah, so flex direction. So we can set our flex box, the best box, to have 2 children, which each have their own flex boxes, which can be a little confusing, but I'll show a diagram in a second. But you can see that so we say that, remember how we saw that layouts can be made up of rows of columns of rows? This is how that's happening. So we have our big box, which is best box. And then inside of that, we have the 2 children that you saw earlier. And then inside of that, we have 2 other flex box. We have 1 flex box that contains 2 items as well. So to go back to the code structure of this, we have our best box. Hold on. We have our best box, which contains everything. We have its 2 children, which you see as the dark blue boxes here. And then those each have 2 p tags, which you can see they're numbered here. Cool. So let's look at the Flexbox axes. So with flex direction row, our main axis is going from left to right, and our cross axis is going up, down. Anyone have questions on that? Should be fairly intuitive. Okay. So when we do flex direction column, we're reversing these. So our main axis is up, down, and then our cross axis is from left to right. Cool. Any questions on that? Great. So next, we might want to do some spacing inside of that. You might have seen that the light boxes inside of the dark boxes were in the left corner, which might not be what we want to see. So we can use justify content to the center. Justify content is saying, let's edit things or move things on the main axis. So our main axis, because we used row, our main axis, because we use row, is going from left to right. So when we use center here, we're centering it on the left to right axis. Does that make sense? Cool. So our first possibility was centering. We can also use space between. So space between says give our two boxes as much room apart as you can possibly give them inside of this box. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes. So the question is, if there's more boxes than two, right? What would happen? So they would spread apart evenly, as far apart as they can. So if we have three, there'd be one in the center and one on the left and right edge. Yeah. If there's four, there's two in the center, spaced apart, and then two on the edge. Cool. So next we have space around. Space around gives us some space. It's kind of the bridge between center and space between. It gives us some space on the sides as well as space between each item. And I believe the calculation for this is that the space in between each item is the same amount of space as it is from the edge, in case you guys were wondering. Cool. So just as a summary of how how justify content works, it defines how the extra space that we're giving in the main direction, it tells us how we're going to distribute that. So there's a couple more in here that we didn't get to mention, but flex start is just saying that we push everything to the beginning of the axis. So when we say left to right, we're putting it on the left side. If it's right to left, flex start is on the right side. Flex end is the exact opposite. It goes at the end of that axis. Center we've seen, space between we've seen, space around we've seen, and space evenly gives us a little bit more space than space around. So whenever you're using these and you want to use something like space around or space evenly, just give it a shot and see whichever one works better. So now let's see what happens on the cross axis. So the way that we modify things on the cross axis is using align items. Align items basically does the same thing as justify content, but on that opposite axis. So our main axis here, just to remind you guys, is the left to right axis. So our opposite axis, our cross axis, is going to be on the up to down axis. Sorry, I said axis a lot. Did anyone get confused? Yeah. So our main axis, which we've been modifying using justify content, that's on our left to right. And the cross axis of this Flexbox is up to down. So now with align items, we're going to affect that cross axis. Any other questions? No, so align item specifically modifies the cross axis. Yeah, it's not changing the main axis to be up, down. It's just saying the cross axis is this, and I'll modify that. Any other questions? Great questions, by the way. Cool. So right here, we're using a very similar process than you guys might be noticing. Align item center just pushes everything into the center, gives us equal space on both sides. Align items with flex start puts them at the very top or the beginning of our cross axis. And flex end puts them at the end of our cross axis, so at the bottom of the box. Any questions on how we got here? Yeah.
So they have like the same properties, it's just that they're doing different axes.
Yeah, so align items, there's no like space between at all because you don't have like multiple things on this axis because everything is going to be on that one axis. So we only really have flex start, flex end, center. There's going to be one more, but I'll cover that in just a second. Yeah, any questions on align items? Great question. Okay, cool. So again, a summary for all of them. Flex start, we put them at the top of our axis. Usually it'll be the top if you're using row. And flex end will be the bottom. Center puts them directly in the middle of our box. And stretch says that each element should be stretched on the cross axis to fit the entire box. So you can see like the elements here are our orange boxes and the purple box is our main container. And you can see how they're kind of being moved around based on align items. Yeah. Any questions on that? Cool. So now we're able to control both of our axes here using justify content and align items. So what if we combine them? So here we want to push them into the bottom right of our box. So we're going to have them on flex end on both because our axes are left to right and top to bottom. Does everyone understand where we got that? Cool. Great. Next, another example, if we want them to be spaced apart, but in the center horizontally, we could use justify content space between and align items center. Perfect. So what if we wanted them spaced apart and on the bottom of our screen? How could we do that? Yeah. Yes. So flex end would put us at the bottom of the box. What about if we wanted everything in the exact center? Yeah. Yes. So both being center would put them in the exact center. Does everyone get where we're getting here? Cool. All right. So here's a link for you guys. This is like Flexbox practice. Yeah, feel free to look at that. Yeah, you can play around with the little boxes and change the flex directions and stuff and see what happens. Cool. So let's take a look at an example. This is like a Discord invite kind of thing. But obviously, a lot of this is not looking right. Does anyone have any ideas on how we might use Flexbox here? So you might notice that we have our logo as our top element, and then we have the title right after it, the description right after that, and then we have these two buttons, but we want it to look like this. So we have our logo on the left of our title and description, and then we have our buttons side by side. So yeah, take a moment to think about how we might use Flexbox. I'll leave you guys here to see maybe if you guys can see anything. Any ideas are good ideas, by the way. Yeah.
You have like that big black box, and that parent box would have maybe like two output cards, so like the fucking arms, and you would like align those vertically so that you make access, and then those two boxes would also.
Yeah. So you're saying that this logo and title description box is one box, and then our buttons is another box, and we stack them on top of each other with Flexbox. Great. Any other ideas on how we could go even deeper than that? So now we've separated them, but we have, yeah, go ahead.
You can combine all the components into one box and set it like that, and then the ones that are you just align those on.
Yes. So for example, these buttons would be aligned horizontally, right? Yeah, and then you want to combine the title and the description. Is that what you're saying? Or
The logo and the.
yeah. So you might notice that they're also horizontally positioned as well. So we might want to use the logo as one box and the title and description together as another box. So then we put those side by side. But yeah, great idea, great idea. Cool. Does everyone kind of understand where we're getting Flexbox to work here? Cool. So we have our main box, which has some content, some padding, some margin. We have this inner box, which represents the logo, the title, and the description, all in one box. And then inside of that, we have two horizontally spaced ones, one with the logo and one with the title and description. And then it doesn't talk about it here, but we also have our buttons, which are horizontally spaced across from each other. Any questions on how Flexbox was used here? Takes a little while to fully grasp it, so don't feel bad if you're not getting it yet. Cool, we'll move on. So next is a really helpful resource that helped me learn Flexbox personally, Flexbox Froggy. This is a really fun like little game you can play. You're basically trying to get these little like colored frogs onto their lily pads using Flexbox. It's a really cute game. Yeah, feel free to check it out. It's really helpful. Yeah, so take a look at that. And here are some additional links and guides. We'll post these on the Notion later in the slides, so feel free to check these out. Yeah, a couple of different resources on like Flexbox and how to use it properly. But yeah, if there's any questions about Flexbox overall, please ask me now. Great, thank you guys. We'll move on to the design portion.